hopes and dreams and plans are now gone. The one person that would have done that, right, was not there. I was not really available emotionally for my kids.
You have to be kind and gentle with yourself. Yes, maybe things could have been a little different, but you were also in your deep grief.
I have come to find out since then that widows statistically lose 75% of their support system.
But it's like you had the plague.
It is.
So-
I felt like Casper, oh, I'm a widow. Or it's just like, oh, a lot of women sometimes they think you want their husband. It's like, no, I don't. I want my husband. I don't want your
Yeah. You keep that husband, right?
I'm afraid I don't want to write the thank you notes. And she's like, Lisa, no one's expecting a thank you. And once she said that, it was like, that's what grief is, right? And then sometimes it feels like a heavy winter coat, and sometimes it feels like a spring jacket. But it's there. It's
there.
It's here for the duration.
We have to normalize and talk about this stuff because it's there.
For people to know that widows are, we do often feel alone, and we do need to be reached out to, even years out. It's never too late.
Of course, you might look back now and be like, oh, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah, exactly.
But you were in a different emotional spot that's where you were at, and nobody there to try to pull you together as a family to help you understand you're all in different spots right now.
Right.
Yeah.
It was very, very difficult. It was just a lot of me trying to figure it out, and the one person that would have done that, right, was not there. The one that grounded us, the one that, the glue of the family, because he was a huge family man. He always, made time for his kids. And I was just trying to figure it out myself, and I was struggling.
Yeah.
And then, that's just a piece of what happens right after losing a spouse. There's also all the other parts that come with that, calling, the telephone company, or trying to get, figure out, how am I going to financially live? All of that, getting back to work. And so it's a lot. It's really a lot. And unfortunately, I just was trying, I just was I was in my own deep grief. I was not really available emotionally for my kids like I should have been.
Well, you say that like I should have been. And you have to be kind and gentle with yourself. Yes, maybe things could have been a little different, but you were also in your deep grief. It's really hard to be in deep grief and then to fully be there for somebody.
It is.
It's really like, I don't know if that's possible. It's learning how to grieve together is more like it. How do we grieve together? Because, when I have people in here, I try to explain, your mom's this way or your dad's this way, or, what else could be going on with them. But like trying to bring everyone together so people can hear each other and understand, it's really not, they're not ignoring you or they're not being snappy with you. You're all grieving, but it looks different on everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
It does.
So being in the mental health field, being in the ministry all your life, can you share, because you shared a little bit with me before, but like, what was that like on the reverse? Like, who was there for you? Like, what was that like? Were people there during this, months, years? What was that like? Were people showing up for you?
It was very hard. I will tell you that the two churches that we were involved in were not there at all, or minimally at best.
Wow.
There. And when I say this, I want the message to come across not as one of like anger or bitterness, but more just to promote awareness, education for any churchgoers, any leaders in churches that might be listening, to know that widows, the Bible is replete with verses about how God says to care for the widow, and, is a defender of the widow. And he makes it very clear that that's
Mhm.
one of the things. It's not, I don't think it's a gray, I think it's definitely, in his wisdom, he knew that widows and widowers need a lot of support.
Yeah.
And sadly, or maybe not sadly, the people that rose to the occasion, I mean, there are a couple people from like a church that I went to that were consistent and are still to this day, but for the most part, not really. Who God used is like a lot of the atheists and agnostics in my life were
Wow.
the ones who stepped up and stepped in, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm thankful. I
Yeah.
am, I mean, that's fine. God did use people, but they weren't the people I thought that he would use.
Right.
Um,
And the people that you gave to, you were there, to support and to guide. You thought like, okay, they could show up. So
right.
what was that like? Was it just like, I mean, I know I work with a lot of people, so I don't know how your story, if it fits in like theirs, like, was it just like, we're there for the first, during the time that, the 6 weeks, the week
Yes,
or
they
2
were there for the
after it?
6 weeks.
Okay.
Yes.
But after it, no, like, "Hey, we're doing a meal train,"
No.
or
In fact,
N
someone tried to pick up a meal train. The meal train was going strong up, during that time, the 6 weeks. And then afterwards, I remember somebody even posted, like, let's get this meal train going. And it was crickets on the Facebook page.
oh my.
And then I remember one person wrote, I'll take a meal to this family or something. I don't know what, somebody's got to help this family. Anyway, and she showed up. She showed up with a ziti, but that was it. That was like the final
It
meal.
was Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I
So
mean,
if
I don't
that's the
know.
final meal, it seems like, again, maybe they didn't know what to do, but you're right, the Bible is pretty clear. Um, so how did that impact your healing? How'd that impact your faith journey? Like, what was that like, knowing
Right.
that the people that you I mean, truly, we're supposed to trust the most and that we think are gonna be there, were not there for you or your family in the time that you need them the most.
In the time I needed them the most. That's correct. It was a big learning curve for me. I have come to find
Mhm.
out since then that widows statistically lose 75% of their support system.
Wow.
So I'm not alone. Um, but I
Why do you
think we
think
collectively need to do better. You know what
Well,
I
I was
mean?
gonna s yeah. Why do you think that is? What do you think did you first of all, did you know anyone before you went through this? Anyone, not older couples, but anyone who was young, middle age, that lost a spouse? Did you know anyone personally?
Personally, no. There was another woman, and this is kind of weird. The church we had just left had like a rash or a series of deaths, some very
Okay.
unexpected. And Ken's was in that, you know,
Yeah.
series, I guess. And I do remember there was a woman. There was a young man who was 23. He was killed in a motorcycle accident, and literally like a week to 10 days later, this man who was in his 40s, I want to say, was killed tragically, was struck by
Mm.
a car. He was like working out of his van. He worked for like a phone company or something. Anyway, and his widow was about 40ish. And so she went to church with us, but we didn't, I wouldn't say we were friends. You know what I mean? I knew who she was. I knew who her kids were.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember the services being around the same time and talking with someone else that I went to church with at the time. And we were talking about whose service we were going to. I don't know why we didn't go to both. But I was like, well, I'm going to the 23-year-olds because I just can't imagine being a mom, losing a son at 23. And she was like, I'm going to, the other one because I can't imagine losing my spouse. And I thought to myself at the time, and this was literally months right before everything went, I was like, that's never going to happen. I remember that having that conversation and that thought crossing my mind. Like, well, that's never going to happen. I just
Yeah.
never. So, um, but back to the people that were helpful, like it shocked me, honestly. And I lost a lot of friends. And like I said, we went to a Christian college and I lost a lot of my Christian college friends. The friend that introduced us, the friend that she was my ride or die. She was in my wedding. She's the one that said, he'll be your friend for life.
And
She
she was there
came.
for the party and, like, while he was sick, so
She was there for the party, and she was
yeah.
there even at that surge in DC. She was at
Yeah.
that appointment with us. She was there with the sewage. I mean, if I do like a montage in my mind, like she was there, like she was actually on a mission trip herself in New York City when she got the news about
Wow.
Ken. And she took a train to Wilmington, and I don't even remember who picked her up, but someone picked her up and brought her to my house. And Ken died on November 17th, the Thursday right before Thanksgiving. And I do remember she came and stayed and like sacrificed her Thanksgiving with her family to be with me. And like when I tell you she was my right hand person for that whole experience, she helped us write the obituary, helped us pick out the coffin, helped my sons put together a playlist for the service, helped me go through the pictures for the poster boards. Like you name it, she
Hmm.
did it. She cleaned the house. She cooked for us.
Wow.
I mean, it was amazing, honestly. And I
So what
remember because Ken was just that guy, right? That every Thanksgiving, this became, once all our kids were old enough to do this, it was like an annual tradition on Thanksgiving Day that we would just randomly show up at a soup kitchen or a church that was having a community Thanksgiving meal and just say, here we are, we're here to help. That was kind of our thing. And so even though it was just a week, Gabby, who was 20, like I said, she was very adamant about doing this to carry on Ken's legacy, to
Yeah.
keep that tradition going. And so Kelly and my mom and I went with Gabby to the local church to dish out stuffing and hand out
Wow.
cranberry sauce. And I still remember thinking that was just like really, just like, you want some cranberry sauce. But in my mind, I'm like, my husband died a week ago. Like, that's just like, why am I here? I did it because of Gabby, of course.
Yeah.
But Kelly was there for that. And then
Yeah.
suddenly things just, I think it got to be too much for her. She couldn't handle it. And I mean, I understand. I was really in a bad way. But slowly she defriended me on Facebook. We haven't talked. We haven't talked like in 8 years.
Wow.
And I asked her, probably a year after everything happened, I asked her on an email, like, what happened? And because she had started writing me emails talking about, like, um, just little things that her husband annoyed her, doing things that we would do, old Lisa, right? Pre-loss Lisa.
Yeah.
Like we would talk on the phone at least twice a day was not uncommon sometimes.
Okay.
That's how tight we were. And, so you bounce off little events of, oh, well, he did this. And then, I'd be like, oh, well, kind of that, but it's all just like, just venting.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you know what I'm saying? But she would do that. And I'd be like, I have nothing to volley with. Like, I wish my husband were alive to, vent about, but I got literally nothing. Also, I'm in like a horrible place.
Yeah.
And so I try to explain it to her, in the beginning, like, I don't have, like, I can't do this. So like a year out, when I asked her, like, why did you send me those emails? Like, she was like, I was trying to get you back to your old self. And when I read that, I realized, like, she just doesn't. And again, we don't know what we don't know, right? Like, you don't know that old Lisa is not coming back.
She's gone. Gone. I don't know if you've ever heard me say it. I know I said it in like the first season podcast. When I go and do talks, I say it a lot. That Linda, she's long gone. Like long gone. Like, and people expect that. They try, like in ignorance, not knowing of
Right.
like, let me just get them get them back. So I guess
Yes.
I'm hearing you say too, and it kind of makes sense, is that again, unless people walk through it, they don't know, but like they don't know what to do, they don't know what to say,
Exactly.
and then it's almost in their own, they get so weirded out, or we're so emotional and they can't hold it or whatever, and like they go away. But it's like, just there isn't normal. There's no getting back to the old Lisa. Like, okay, there's going to be a different Lisa, and I'm still in here, right? That's what, you're still there, but can't you walk with me through that? And it sounds like it with for a lot of people, they can't. They don't know how to do it, which is sad because guess what? Everyone's going to face loss. Everybody. So one thing we know, we're all going to die sometime, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, you know, because you shared that statistic with me before, 75%, and I never knew it was that high. I know that you'll lose a good bit of your support system, but it's like you had the plague.
It is.
So,
I felt like Casper, even like when
wow.
people say, like, oh, I'm a widow, or it's just like, oh, like, just
Wow.
no one really knows what to do with
Yeah.
and there's different theories floating around, right? So people act like they think it's contagious, right? Or like a lot of women, sometimes they think you want their husband. That's shared a lot on widows groups, that like, and it's like, no, I don't. I want my husband. I don't want your husband.
Yeah. You can keep that husband, right? Like, really? Wow.
Yeah, people just get very
People get weird. They get uncomfortable. They don't
uncomfortable,
know
is the
what to
best word.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, with anything, like loss is one of the big ones. But like, yeah, even somebody's sick, having a heart attack, having cancer, it's like, I don't know what to say. So like they get weird and they're uncomfortable. And we have to normalize and talk about this stuff because it's there.
It's
Like you said,
there. It's happening. It happens every day.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably was a little bit of both. I do remember our last conversation very vividly. She had come to surprise me, and or maybe she had come for a kid getting their wisdom teeth removed, and she said, "Do you have anything else to say?" She said, "I'm leaving." And I said, "There's nothing that I could say." I said, "There's nothing you can say to make me feel better, and there's nothing I could say that you would understand." And she said, "Okay." And she left. And that was pretty much it,
Oh,
unfortunately. So,
that's
I
sad.
mean, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
but, and then I
Still,
asked her too, like, why did you defriend me on Facebook? And she was like, I couldn't stand seeing you do life without me, which I also thought was interesting because I was
okay.
trying to, you know, as pick up the pieces, right? Like, I was just trying to get by, and without
Yeah.
Ken and without a bunch
With
of
it,
friends and family that I had just lost. So I just thought it was interesting that she was like, I can, doing life without her when I was like doing life without a lot of people.
yeah. There's all those like not only like people that you're losing, but all those secondary losses that you're talking about too. Like, you know, the person that you ate breakfast with every day, the person you did this with, and then having to deal with all these new things of like, now I have to learn how to do all
Right.
these bills by myself. And
Right.
I have to make decisions. The kids are thinking about doing this, like, and you would bounce everything off each other. Now you're doing
Exactly.
it all alone. And like people don't notice, like, or they don't know that and they don't
They
realize
don't know
how,
that like hopes and dreams and plans are now gone. Anything, whatever we had thought we would do after they left, gone. Um, like you said, I love
eh,
this. My co-parent, we would often talk about, because he was a mental health therapist. We wouldn't use names, but we would certainly talk about some heavy cases sometimes. What do you think about this? Or I had this
yeah,
client do that. Like, what do you think of that? It was like a consult, like a free consult, and we would go to conferences together. Everything was like together. We did ministries together. We raised our kids together. We were that open door policy family that, like, our kids were teenagers. Like, any kid that wanted to, needed to, stop in, come in, hang out. We,
yeah,
you want place to stay for the night, you want a meal. Like that was us. So back to, I was really kind of blindsided and almost like gut punched when not very many people, if any,
Could
came to my, aid.
yeah.
Like I remember I even told the youth pastor of our old church, I was like, no one is ministering to my sons. And he said to me, I don't think Brandon likes me.
Wow. Get over that. Do
And
your
I was
job.
like, you get paid for like first of all, that's your bread and butter. You went to seminary. Also, I don't think that on the cross Jesus was like, hey dad, I think these guys really like me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and truthfully, teenagers don't like many people.
right.
Why did you get into that, right? Yeah. Again, it's
Yeah,
like their own uncomfortableness and ignorance of not knowing what to do or how to do it. And I just tell people all the time, sometimes you just got to show up. You don't got to fix. You don't have to get the old Lisa back or make her feel better. She feels like crap, and she's going to feel like crap for a long time.
right.
You're going to grieve in some capacity for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
Get used to it, people. Doesn't mean you're going to be sobbing on their shoulder all the time, but like people just aren't comfortable with loss and grief. And
yeah.
that's really sad. So like your faith community you lost, and losing friendships, and
Family
where
members.
family,
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
no, it's interesting that you said it because I do remember, kudos to two girlfriends that came that I had used to work with like a long time ago. They just showed, like, they literally just showed up. They had nothing in their hands. They didn't have a casserole. They didn't, you know what I mean? They came in and it reminds me of Job, honestly. Like they sat on the floor with me. Like when I think about that, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, Lisa, like you didn't even offer them a glass of water or a cookie or anything. I didn't. I was so not
You
well.
couldn't.
And
Yeah.
we just sat on the floor. That's all they just sat with me.
Oh.
And that was the greatest to this day. Like, I remember once a few years after that, like I was supposed to meet them to get together. And I was driving down there. Part of me really didn't want to, like, I was just not feeling it. I had like a thing going on with one of my kids and I was just like, oh, I really don't want to. And I was like, Lisa, these two women literally sat with you. That's all, you know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
anyone you can be vulnerable or be yourself with, it's these two.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Wow.
but
And that's it. They just sat with you. That's amazing.
on the floor, not even on a chair,
On the
not
floor.
even a sofa. Like and I
They
had a lot of chairs in that other house. Like,
so guess what? Taking us back to grad school here. The principle that they would say over and over for social work, you got to meet them right where they're at.
yeah,
They met you right where you were
they
at.
did. That's
I say that with grief all the time. I'm like the old social work saying, like, meet them where they're at. That's what you got to do with people who are mourning. You got to meet them right there. They're on the floor. Get on the floor.
get on the floor.
That's perfect. Wow. Okay, so people
Spoke
showed up that you
volumes.
didn't expect.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Of course.
And then
I wouldn't say I
where
didn't expect them to, but they did it in an unexpected way. Yeah.
right.
Kudos.
So where else did you get your sources of strength, or how did you like find other ways to heal? You said finding therapists were tough. The people in the church weren't really there and showing up. So what worked for you?
Yeah. What did work for me? When I try
Or
to
what did you
think
try?
about it, I don't know. I remember feeling very alone. I will say my aunt, she was widowed at a young age as well, like in her early
Okay.
50s. My uncle had cancer. He died right before Ken and I got married.
Okay.
And she and I had always had a very special bond anyway. And then
Mm-hmm.
after everything happened, it was even stronger,
Wow. Okay.
because we had that commonality now on top of everything else.
Yeah.
So I will say she was probably the person I found myself going to a lot, just because
Yeah.
I knew she got it and I knew she would listen. And I mean, she's just amazing. Honest, a woman of an enormous faith too. I think about, like, I asked her to be in my wedding after her husband passed away. I was like, now that you know what I mean? I was like, why did you do that? That's kind of like, because I have a hard time going to weddings, even now, you know what I
Mm.
mean? But clearly she was going to come, but I don't know. Like, I think my parents and I at the time thought it would be a good distraction for her. I don't really, again, you don't know what you don't know. It was all well intentioned. She accepted it. She was matron of honor. Like, she rocked it. She nailed it. She
But you
was
you
there.
yeah, but you learn through your own grief things to do, not to do, or to be honest, like, I know that you just lost your husband and probably weddings are, like, probably not what you're thinking. I wanna ask you to be my matron of honor, but if you don't want to, I totally understand
Yeah.
too, but I wanted to at least extend that. Like, you would do it different probably, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, like, I know the same thing, like, some of the stupid things that I would say, like, you think are okay. That's why I used the term ignorant. I was ignorant. I did not know what I did not know. And I would say things that I thought were helpful to people. Oh, goodness. After walking through grief many times, boy, not helpful. Not helpful. Yeah. So, but she was there for you.
She was there for
And
me. And in fact,
yeah.
going back to the financial piece, I remember, um, after Ken passed away, my brother crunched the numbers and he showed me what I needed to make, to stay in that house and, live the life that we were not, it wasn't like an extravagant
Well, wait,
lifestyle
you're both social
by
workers.
any
So,
means. Right. But this was just to, pay the mortgage, pay the car insurance, basics, food,
right.
hit a movie every now and then. It was nothing crazy, right? But like, he showed me that number and I was just like, I remember I said social workers don't make that money. We just don't. Like, that's not, I can't. And I was literally envisioning us like downsizing to like an apartment. Like, I just didn't know. And my friend emailed me just like a couple days later. I mean, a totally God thing, but and said, "Hey, I don't know what your financial situation." So she prefaced it. I don't know what your financial situation is, but the state is looking for, to hire somebody in this position as a consultant, and you might want to check it out. And the money was in the ballpark of what my brother.
Wow.
And
Wow. So God showed up and answered prayer right there.
so, and my aunt was with me because she had stayed with me, for the whole thing. She came for the service and then we buried him a couple days later and she stayed for the burial and then she stayed for like 5 more days after that. And
Mm.
and I remember we were talking and she was like, "Lisa, this is a God thing." Because I was still I mean, this was like right after he passed away. And I was like, there's no way, because you had to like write a proposal, like this whole, it's like a 10-page
Oh
paper
my.
pretty much, answering all these questions about all of these clinical things. And I had just buried my husband. And I was like, I can't do this right now. And she's
Yeah.
like, this is God. This is God giving you this job. Like, you have to go through the doors and you have to apply. And I was just like, I don't know, Esther. Like, I just don't think I can do this. But, he did carry me through that, I will say, because I got the job. It was a miracle, honestly. Walking into a
Yeah.
boardroom of 10 people.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Now, this was a
Okay.
couple months after, but
But still.
still, I remember it was right before Valentine's Day, and Valentine's Day was another special day for us. And
Mm.
um, yeah, I remember walking in and seeing this room full of people, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not able to do this," But
Yeah.
you do what you
But
have
you
to
did it.
do. And
Yeah.
anyway, so that
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of like these challenges that I think most people don't realize, and are normal for what losing a spouse, but that losing other supports, losing financial the person taking care of, losing the person to help you make decisions, losing your co-parent. Like there's a lot of these losses and these layers that everybody's like most people aren't thinking, even though if they're in a relationship or they're married, they know they have that person, but until people go through it, they don't even realize how layered this is, right?
lots and
And
lots of layers.
yeah, and you had mentioned like widow support groups. So it sounds like too, that's where you got a lot of other support and probably felt validated while you were going through this because other people were like sharing
Yes, I would
similar.
say
Yeah.
so. Like a friend of mine, her, well, we were more like acquaintance backslash Facebook friends at the time, but when her husband passed away a few months after Ken did, we kind of like, you know, became close. And then
Okay.
she's the one that opened my eyes to all of these. I feel like they're kind of like underground, you know what I mean? Because I didn't know before then, but on Facebook, there are quite a few
Yep.
support groups for widows, widowers,
Yep.
you know, they are under all sorts of different names, but it does help to see that people are going through the same experiences. um, you do feel
Yeah.
validated. You're like, okay, I'm not losing my mind. Like when I got frustrated with the Sprint
Yeah.
person, or, wanted to bite the Apple phone person's head off when they asked me for the 20th time for the password. And I said, the person that knows the password is not alive. Like,
Stop reading your script, right? Stop reading the scripts. Just answer me, please. Like, listen.
help me get into this phone. That's what I need help with. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So, yes, you were able to find these underground groups that were there. But honestly, that's truthful. Most of us, why would we be looking? Why would we notice that? We don't, because we're not looking until we need it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
That's
so yeah. So you said something earlier about Thanksgiving morning just showing up, like, and your daughter saying, like, we're going to do this that first, like, what, a week, 2 weeks
a week,
after.
1 week.
1 week. Okay. So how have you or your children or all of you continued to um, honor his legacy or other traditions or moments that help you feel connected to him?
One that my daughter and my sister-in-law came up with, which I love, was around Thanksgiving, because Ken loved, loved, loved cooking. He was good at
Okay.
it. He loved being creative. He loved watching all those Food Network shows. In fact, whenever we took a road trip, he would Google, like, you know, the ones that were on, like that show, the Dives Diners. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
One show. He would always look for something that was featured on Food Network, or that got a
Wow.
Food Network nod, and we would just like go to these random
He
places.
was a foodie.
He
I
was
think that's what they
a foodie.
call
I
him.
think you
Yeah.
could say that. And
Yeah.
we just followed along. Like, yeah, sure, it made it more fun for sure. It is definitely memorable. But we so Ashley and Gabby came up with this great idea to have like a Thanksgiving throwdown, and that all of us would pair up into teams and make a dish. Because Ken would like sit
Oh,
down and watch Food Network, and he would always try to find like a new dish to make every Thanksgiving weeks before, like,
okay.
Halloween. And he's like taking notes. And so we got aprons made that like two yellow
Oh,
ones, two orange
wow.
ones, and everyone picked a partner, and they say Thanksgiving throwdown. And with COVID, we weren't able, that kind of put a little pause on it, but we still remember the first one or two fondly, that we got together, we paired up with
Yeah.
somebody, and we made a Thanksgiving dish. And yeah, it was supposed to be a contest. It wasn't really a contest, whoever made the best dish, but that was a fun way of
Yeah.
honoring his memory and his legacy. The other ones I can think of is on his birthday, we try to eat a crab cake, because he's
Okay.
from Eastern Shore of Maryland, and so he loved his crabs.
Okay.
That proved to be a little challenging because my kids are in like North Carolina, Philly, and California, so they're not notorious for their crabs at any of those places.
Okay.
We would like take a picture and like show something crabby or crab related. I know for a fact, Ken used to do this all the time. He never had a problem with going to the movies by himself.
Okay.
Every now and then he would go. And so Gabby says that sometimes she tries to do that, so as a nod, to his birthday, or on the day that he passed away.
Okay.
We try to do something that he liked to do. I'm pretty sure the first year we went, we tried to like pay it forward, like
Mhm.
pay for the people behind us at McDonald's or something like that, because he liked his Mickey D's as well. But I think for me personally, now that I'm in a healthier spot, I really put a lot of drive into helping the Latino community. Not that it wasn't ever anything I loved or was passionate about, but like knowing how supportive he was for my work in that area kind of gives me like an extra bump. You know what I mean? Like an extra
Yeah.
fuel, like, or if I do something, I'm like, Ken's smiling right now. Ken's, giving me the thumbs up. He's still
Mm.
supporting me,
Yeah.
because he always did. He always just
Yep.
really was extra supportive, especially when it came to that.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
from grad school days, like that was my thing. That was always kind of
Mhm.
my thing.
Yeah.
So,
And I love what you're saying because that is one thing that they're always with us. Even though we lost them physically and their presence in our everyday life, that I'm behind you. I'm supporting you. You know what he would say. Like, you can't lose that.
right,
You can't lose that. And I think that's so important for you to hold on to that. And that, like you said, that's your fuel. That kind of gives you that push that you need to keep going. And that is so important. And you're keeping him as part of your everyday life too. Like as you're doing that.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. And I know you said crab, like that's important. And if we go like that, right? What's behind you?
Oh yeah,
Can seafood, the crab, and I didn't realize until you just said that, like why the can seafood and the crab. I
yeah.
just
So funny story, and I was just
yeah.
sharing this with somebody yesterday. So when I got that job, the job that my friend told me about, I had to work from home. And so I turned my guest bedroom into a guest bedroom backslash home office. And I asked a friend of mine who was into doing like these little makeovers, like a la HGTV, if you will. Could she come and make over my room so that it's a little bit more like a home office as well? And
Mhm.
so this was in another town, mind you, when I lived in Smyrna. That's where Ken passed away, when we were in Smyrna, which is an hour north of where I'm at now. And she wrote, her husband made that as a nod to Ken, and they
Uh
put it in that guest bedroom. And if you notice, it says Rehoboth Beach.
okay.
And I now live 10 minutes from Rehoboth Beach. But at that time, I had
Oh
no idea,
wow. Wow.
right?
That's cool.
It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy
Yeah.
if you really think
Yeah.
about it.
That's it
And
is.
talking about
Yeah.
like another way that I try to
Yeah.
honor him, like I moved down here and I am trying, because the old house that we lived in, he really, his fingerprints were everywhere. He loved doing that. He
Mhm.
loved decorating. Like I said, he watched HGTV and Food Network. Those were like his things. He watched Trading Spaces before it became really popular, honestly. And so he knew where he wanted the recess lighting. He knew how to add this flooring. Like he picked it all out. He picked everything out. I was not good at
Wow.
that. I didn't know anything about that. I let him do it because he was good at it and he enjoyed it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, it wasn't like he just picked it and that was it. Like he was like, "What do you think of this?" But I was always like, "Oh, it's great. That's great. That's great. I
Yeah.
trust you." And so now that I'm here, I tried to do right by him and try to
Yeah.
to make this my own. I'm kind of renovating it a little bit as I go. But when I got these floors, I went back and forth with my new flooring so many times, and I didn't really go back and forth. I always ended up going back to this one particular floor. And I remember recently when I was finally going to actually install the flooring, I had everything in motion. I had to go buy the flooring. And I was sitting in the Lowe's parking lot and I was like, all right, I got to make sure it's the right flooring. And so I went back, made sure this was the one. Like I went through all my photos, like this is the one I've screenshotted over the past 2 years. Like this is the one you want. Don't, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to walk in and do it. And one of me and Ken's songs as an inside joke, really, is I'm happy to be stuck with you. And don't you know, as I'm
That
getting
came
to the
on.
flooring department of Lowe's to buy this flooring, Happy to Be
That
Stuck with
was
You
on.
comes on. And it's probably, I hadn't heard that song in forever, Linda.
I was just thinking, I don't remember last time I heard it.
Right? Like, when's the last time? It's an old song. It's ancient.
Yeah.
And not to age us, but it was popular when I was in high school. So I was like, okay, this is definitely the floor. Like, it was just like, all right,
Yeah.
I, I know
It's
I'm
at
in
those
the brain of it.
moments. Do you look up and like, all right, Ken. All right.
Right.
You know he's there. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's so
Of course.
cool. Like there's moments like that sometimes people do, they miss it, but like, nah, you made sure you got it. And but also the same thing you were saying, 2 years, like there's that other piece of doing this is you're learning to do it on your own and you don't have that person to like bounce it off of. And that was his thing. So you just trusted. So he did it. And now like that's what people don't realize. And this is leading into my question I wanted to ask is like, what advice would you give someone who's kind of facing something like a loss of a spouse, especially when they have children to care for and like they don't have a lot of support around them? Is there any advice that you would give them?
That's a tough one. I mean, always be kind and gentle to yourself, like you mentioned, but to learn from my mistakes, what I've tried to tell people is, make sure, don't do what I did. Check in on your kids, try to be present for them as much as you can while you are still grieving, because like you said, it's almost impossible. It is pretty much impossible,
Yeah.
but if I were to do it over again, I would certainly do that part differently,
Yeah.
because that's probably my biggest regret, is just not being present for my children at that time. So, and as far as like, losing so many supports, yeah, I mean, if you can find somebody else that has lost a spouse, that's probably the way to go, just because we're in it to together,
Yeah.
and nobody knows like we know. Um, but unfortunately, also what I have found in, my experience is that I feel like when we're really in it, like fresh in it, we see all that's needed, like all the different supports that are needed. Like if I were ever to do like tele church, or if sometimes people ask me like, I want to, like on these Facebook groups, right? I'm starting a widows ministry at my church. What are some ideas? I mean, I can throw out like help with taxes, help with changing, air filters, mowing the lawn, like babysitting, especially if they have younger children. That's it. They're solo parents. They're not trading off every other weekend kind of parents. Now that is a
Yep.
very challenging parenting as well. And that's another kind of loss.
Yeah.
It's very deep. I'm not taking from that, but I'm just saying like it's unique in that the solo parents, the widowed or, parents are the ones that are with these children 24/7. They don't necessarily have that other person or someone to say, to care for their kids if they need to run out and do something. Even just like a stop at the store, you know what I mean? Like coming home and being like, oh, I forgot eggs. Like, oh, I would text, oh, can you bring egg? No, there's no one else. Like, I got to go back out in the rain. And I don't know. It sounds silly and trite, but also like these are
No.
things that are, and like if someone showed up with a casserole right now, I'm not going to lie, I would be so grateful. Like, I would be like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I have to say, like, for me, I was definitely like, oh, don't be bringing me food. Don't do that. Like, I got it under control. And it wasn't until someone changed my perspective on it. And when I lost my second brother, but then when I was going through what I went through with my husband and then with my dad, and when he passed and people started bringing it, I gotta say, once they stopped, I was like, "Yo, you can bring a meal again." Like, it was so helpful. Like, it really, because my kids were young, and with all that stuff going on, it is really helpful. So, my other question, and you answered, is to people that are out there listening that may not have lost a spouse, but like, just how can you support somebody who has, because your experience is not unlike other people that I've talked to and worked with where they just felt like so neglected and thrown away and ghosted, like you said, like
Ghosted.
just, yeah, like they just invisible, like showing up. I like what you said about, hey, do you need help with taxes? Or, oh, you need to change your air filter. I was just changing ours. Can I change yours? Just show up, mow their lawn, like things that
Just show up. Like my neighbor, he
some,
mowed his lawn. He was mowing my lawn. I just looked out and there he was mowing my lawn.
yeah,
Didn't ask me, just doing it. Just
yeah,
just do it. Like the
yeah,
Nike commercial, just do it.
just do it.
If
Yeah,
you have a thought of, someone that's lost someone, just show up and, because if you ask, and I know this is a very common thing we all know, right? It's kind of a
yeah.
almost common.
No, I'm okay.
You put the burden on that person to like decide what to do.
Yeah,
How do you, call me if you need me, or how can I help? Well, I don't know how you can help me. Like I have so many things you can help me with. I don't even know where to begin, but
yeah,
if you want to just go out and get me groceries, like I remember my friend drove from South Carolina and, like in early December, and she just took me to the Walmart and just bought all these groceries,
yeah,
just bought them and said, what else do
yeah.
you need? And she wrote thank you notes for me because
There's
I got
another thing.
things that I felt overwhelmed with these thank you. In fact, my coworkers had given me a miniature Christmas tree with all of these individual like ornaments, but they were all like gift cards. And each
Wow.
coworker had, Walmart, Chick-fil-A, you name it, it was there. And I refused to open them because I didn't want to have to write the thank you notes. And I told a friend that worked with me, she's like, did you like the
Mm,
tree? Did you like the cards? And I said, I haven't opened them yet. And this was like probably weeks later. She's like, what do you
wow.
mean? And I'm like, I'm afraid I don't want to write the thank you notes. And she's like, Lisa, no one's expecting a thank you.
Yeah,
And once she said that, it was like,
yeah,
you know, like, oh, okay. But now, as we all know, there are people like that are genuinely like, I'm not expecting a thank you. And then there are others who unfortunately kind of are.
yeah,
And so when my friend came up, she thanked the people that were on that list, that those that I knew were probably wanting or
yeah,
expecting a thank you. And she just wrote these thank you notes like there was no tomorrow. I mean, she took me to Sam's Club to go Christmas shopping. And not only like, cause she had a Sam's Club membership. I didn't at the time, just like not only that, but she like wrapped the gift,
yep,
for my, like just doing things that you don't think of. I know someone else came and sat right beside me as I clicked on Amazon because he was the Christmas gift shopper. That was him. Like he would buy, I remember he'd come in like September and October with gifts for the kids that he just like, look what I found. And he would like smile and be like, oh, they're going to love it. He was so excited. Like that was his
oh,
thing,
yeah,
and then that first Christmas, I was paralyzed. I was overwhelmed and
oh,
paralyzed. And I
yeah,
was in no place to be wanting to buy Christmas gifts.
yep, that's understandable.
But at the same time, if I didn't do it, who was going to do it? So that
Yeah,
I had another friend did come and sit, and she just watched me click on Amazon. Like I just needed somebody to hold me accountable because if I didn't have her, like I know it wasn't going to happen. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But these are
yeah,
things like you said that you don't really think about. Take my boys were teenagers, right? And I have a lot of anxiety, especially driving. Who's going to take them out to practice? Like I had to
yeah,
try to find anybody. Like I really felt
yeah,
like they didn't have anybody, honestly. There were some people
mm,
that did take them out, I think occasionally, but to be honest, like it was not, these are things you
yeah,
don't think of, right? Oh, she's got
yeah,
it. Like, yeah, they were learning how to drive. That's, usually that's something a lot of times, I don't want to say usually, it's tag teamed,
yeah.
right? But,
So
um,
what I'm thinking too, as you're saying that, is that for people listening, if you're if you're doing that yourself, like you're taking your kid driving or you're going and picking up eggs because you forgot them or you are changing the filter, you just think, oh, they probably are doing that. Let me go check in and do that. Or, that's the best way, I think, is really just if you're already doing something, your friends probably have to do the same thing. Maybe I should reach out. Maybe I can just do it. That's probably the only way that people would be able to really
I
be
like that.
able to think about that. Yeah.
Because
I know.
otherwise you don't think twice,
And I
"Oh, I'm
think
doing my taxes. Maybe so and so needs help
oh, yeah,
with
like,
getting their taxes done."
does she know that that is a lot, like, that's a whole 'nother thing you could talk about, like, that piece of it, but I think that's a good way to look at it is, like, because you said it earlier, it's grief fog. You can't think clearly, and then somebody putting that on you, like, right there, like, "Oh, what do you need?" Or, "Call me if you need something." Like, "What? I need everything." Like, "Where do you want me to start?" Like, kinda thing. Like, it's hard. It's
Yeah,
really hard for the person if you do know what you need, I always encourage people, speak up,
right.
tell
If you
somebody.
do know what you need, if you can think
Yes,
of that, that's
but
great.
most people really struggle, so I have one more thing. Well, 2 questions, 2 more questions for you. Like, what it's 8 years. What keeps you moving forward? Like, and how yeah, how do you define, like, I'm I'm continuing to grieve, but I'm also working on healing. Like, what's that look like for you?
It's been very hard. I'm not gonna lie. It's
Okay.
been a very hard 8 years, very long 8 years, very dark 8 years. Um, I moved to this house thinking it would help because I was, like, yes, when Ken died, obviously right away, the fresh grief, the raw grief. But then when my kids left for school, it was like it started all over again
Yep.
because I had planned on being with Ken. That's what we had planned on. That's
Mm,
not the only reason you do date nights, right? But as sometimes married couples, you often hear that in the circles of, marriage conferences or books, whatever, right? Like go out on a date with your spouse because when after your kids leave, you don't want to be left
yep.
looking at a stranger.
Like,
Um,
who are you?
that wasn't why we went out on them.
Right.
However, that's what's often said. And, it was like, okay, well, here I am by myself. Like that was not my plan,
Yeah.
So I found myself once again
Yep.
really being very sad, not like enjoying where I was. So I thought, and I had taken a job that by that time I had taken a job an hour south. So that's where I moved here. But honestly, like I have really struggled with being alone, being by myself. And I
Okay.
have filled my
Yeah.
time probably not in a healthy way. Outsiders will be like, oh my gosh, you're always doing something. You're doing something fun all the time. You're so fun. And I'm like, no, it's unhealthy. Like I should I should be able to sit at home and be by
Yeah.
myself. But when I do that, all it does is remind me that I'm very alone in this world.
Mm,
And I don't like that. So I don't hang out at home, and
yeah.
like I mentioned, I am redoing my house and making it, quote unquote my own. And I do think that is helping a little bit, but like, not everybody has the, resources to do that. You know what I'm saying? So you can't
Yeah.
really always rely on that. Um, but I will say too, I do feel like I was having a real dark moment just recently, probably as recent as March. I remember it vividly because this is another time when God was like, all right, my kid needs a little help. I was eating Chipotle for a fundraiser and I had no one to go to Chipotle with. All right, fine. Like, it's just weird. Like when you're by yourself, it's like when Ken was alive, I didn't care that I ate Chipotle by myself in a parking lot. You know what I mean? Because I knew I had somebody,
Yep.
but now when you're really truly alone, it's just a very different
Yeah.
world. Walking into eating in a restaurant by myself, no, I won't do that. I won't continue to do it. Why? Because it magnifies the fact that I really am alone.
Mm,
Whereas before,
okay.
I didn't think twice about it. Right.
Yeah.
But I was in the parking lot of Chipotle and just feeling sorry for myself, right? And just like, wow, I'm truly alone. Like I've hit my lowest. I'm here in the Chipotle parking lot. I have no friends to just say, hey, you want to get Chipotle with? Um, this is not, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. And within 24 hours, like every kind of like agency, organization, person I've done work for, like email, you know what I mean? Like, oh, we need a social worker to do this. Oh, are you still interested in doing that? Oh, and I was just like, and then a potential new client called for my private practice. You know what I mean? It was just like,
Yeah.
okay, God, I get it. You got stuff. You're I don't need a
Actually,
brick to fall on my head, but I guess I kind of
but
did.
there are people. So I hear that grief continues. Grief is going to be there. Feeling that alone is very hard, and that is really common. So being busy kind of helps you. It's not always healthy, sorry. But I also hear that, when you're realizing it, that something shows up to make you like kind of shift and be like, all
Yes,
right, there is hope.
like a jolt.
Like, yeah, like a jolt, and like, all right, there's purpose, and there's like, I can shift, but it's not easy. And the kids moving out, going to college, different stage, weddings. Yep, you're going to feel it. And I think most people need to understand that that's normal and that happens, and you're not alone that way. And you'll eventually kind of move past that situation or move through that situation, but there's that constant. And hopefully it won't be as intense.
Right.
Um,
The grief is not as intense, right? Like, I'm not
yeah,
crying hysterically in the shower. I'm not crying and screaming hysterically on the drives home from work. Like, those are
yeah,
definitely in my rearview mirror a long, long time ago.
yeah.
But um, it's
But you
definitely
still have
still
struggles.
have those times where, I feel like I compare it to like a heavy winter coat, like a grief, like almost like a weighted blanket. That's what grief is, right? And then sometimes it feels like a heavy winter coat, and sometimes it feels like a spring jacket. Sometimes it's just like a little
Yeah,
kimono, a light sheer kimono, and other times
I
it's,
like that.
you know, but
Yeah,
but it's there. It's
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 there.
here. It's here for the duration. It's not going
Yeah,
away. Um,
yeah,
so
it's there. And it's just learning, how do you grow with your grief? How are you growing with your grief? That's the way I look at it, because the grief is
exactly.
there. So, if you have one thing that you hope that the listeners can take away from your story, what would it be?
One thing.
I know it's hard because you shared a lot and there's so much there. Is there anything? Maybe there's not. Maybe there's just like, everything I said is important. And
I feel like everything I said is important. I was
yeah,
really hoping to promote awareness and education, and for people to know that widows are, we do often feel alone, and we do need to be reached out to, even years out. It's never too late to pick up the phone or to text or to drop something
yeah,
off, or just like we talked about, just show up.
just show up. Yeah,
We're never, I don't want to make it sound like dependent or needy, but like we would always welcome, you know, I, I think sometimes people think, oh, well, it's so far. Like, I never reached out to her and it's so far out. Like, it's too late now. You know what I mean? And it's not, it's never too late.
yeah, yeah. I like that. It's never too late. You're right. I think that's important. And I think, like you said, everything that you shared, very important, like your entire story and what you went through, right when it started. And, it's just the polar opposite of like all these supports that are there, and let me show up and help you and be there. And then the silence of it is just the stark difference between the two is just, it's alarming. And if I don't know, listening to it, like that's one of the things I got hearing your story was really like, we need to do better. We need to show up for people that lost a spouse. And even we don't know, it's not contagious. We're not stealing your husband or your wife. Just be there and constantly think of that, not just 2 weeks out, a couple
Right.
months out, like you said, continue and moving forward.
Continually moving forward. And like, I will say my neighbors really stepped up in it. I hadn't been friends with them, honestly. We were just neighbors. And then when Ken passed away, they just really, I don't know if
Wow.
you're familiar with a man called Otto with Tom Hanks,
I can't,
but
I am familiar, but I don't think I ever saw it.
he's a widower, and it flashes back to, his love, the love of his life. His wife had passed away, but in the meantime, after post loss, these neighbors move in and they literally save his life. And I tell my neighbors that,
Mm,
like, I feel like they really, embraced me in my and my kids in our darkest moment.
Yeah.
And, to this day, we're very close.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Um,
And that's the thing that I heard throughout your story is that, like, again, it may not have been the people that you expected or hoped for, but people showed up and were able to just meet you where you were at. And that's awesome. Yeah.
yes, it is.
Yeah. So if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, do you have social media? Is there any way that people would be able to get in touch if they
Oh,
wanted?
absolutely. Yeah, sure. I'm on
Okay.
Facebook and I'm on Instagram. I don't have a professional page for my mental health
Just
therapy, but
just your name.
yeah, well, it would be Lisa Elena Zaletta on Facebook.
Okay. Actually, well, you'll give me the link. I have the link actually, and I'll have it in the
Oh,
show
that's what
notes
you
so
do.
that so people will be able to get in touch with you if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So good. All right. I thank you so much for spending so much time. I know you probably didn't expect to talk this long, but I really appreciate it. And I know that a lot of people are going to get so much from this. And I just think the message too that they're not alone is so important. And thank you for sharing your story with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to another episode of Mending Piece by Piece podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, and share with family and friends. See you in 2 weeks. And until next time, continue mending piece by piece, healing through grief, one step at a time.